Hi everyone. Let's do a short story about a tiger today. It's called Grandpa Tickles a Tiger and it was written by Ruskin Bond. If you find the lesson interesting, do consider subscribing. If you do, you will get notified each time I post new content like this. And I have plenty of stories and poems for you. This is a story about how the narrator's grandfather finds a tiger cub in the Terai jungle near Dehradun and takes it home. Grandmother names it Timothy and feeds it milk from a feeding bottle. Let's start. Grandpa Tickles a Tiger by Ruskin Bond. Let's find out how Grandpa tickles a tiger, shall we? Timothy, the tiger cub, was discovered by grandfather on a hunting expedition in the Terai jungle near Dehra. Dehra meaning Dehradun, which is the capital of Uttarakhand, a town on somewhere near the foothills of the Himalayas, around 300 kilometers from Delhi. And the Terai jungle is a thick jungle found on the lowland at the foothills of the Himalayas. Grandfather was no shikari, but as he knew the forests of the Shivalik hills better than most people, he was persuaded to accompany the hunting party to advise on the terrain. The sportsmen were giving up all hope of finding a tiger and were beginning to shoot at jackals when grandfather, strolling down the forest path at some distance from the rest of the party, discovered a little tiger about 18 inches long hiding among the intricate roots of a banyan tree. Grandfather picked him up and brought him home after the camp had broken up. At first, the tiger cub, who was named Timothy by grandmother, was brought up entirely on milk given to him in a feeding bottle by our cook Mahmood. But the milk proved too rich for him, and he was put on a diet of raw mutton and cod liver oil. Timothy was provided with two companions, Toto the monkey, who was bold enough to pull the young tiger by the tail and then climb up the curtains if Timothy lost his temper, and a small mongrel puppy found on the road by grandfather. At first, Timothy appeared to be quite afraid of the puppy and darted back with a spring if it came too near. Finally, he allowed the puppy to crawl on his back and rest there. One of Timothy's favorite amusements was to stalk anyone who would play with him. And so, when I came to live with grandfather, I became one of the tiger's favorites. He was by this time the size of a full grown retriever. And when I took him out for walks, people on the road would give us a wide berth. When he pulled hard on his chain, I had difficulty keeping up with him. His favorite place in the house was the drawing room, and he would make himself comfortable on the long sofa, reclining there with great dignity and snarling at anybody who tried to get him off. When Timothy was about 6 months old, a change came over him. He grew steadily less friendly. When out for a walk with me, he would try to steal away to stalk a cat. Sometimes at night we would hear frenzied cackling from the poultry house, and in the morning there would be feathers lying all over the veranda. Timothy had to be chained up more often, and finally, when he began to stalk Mahmood the cook about the house with what looked like villainous intent, grandfather decided it was time to transfer him to a zoo. The nearest zoo was at Lucknow, 200 miles away. reserving a first-class compartment for himself and Timothy. No one would share a compartment with them. Grandfather took him to Lucknow, where the zoo authorities were only too glad to receive as a gift a well-fed and fairly civilized tiger. About 6 months later, when my grandparents were visiting relatives in Lucknow, Grandfather took the opportunity of calling at the zoo to see how Timothy was getting on. I was not there to accompany him, but I heard all about it when he returned to Dera. Arriving at the zoo, Grandfather made straight for the particular cage in which Timothy had been interned. The tiger was there, crouched in a corner, full grown, and with a magnificent striped coat. "Hello, Timothy," said Grandfather, and climbing the railing with ease, he put his arm through the bars of the cage. The tiger approached the bars and allowed Grandfather to put both hands around his head. Grandfather stroked the tiger's forehead and tickled his ear, and whenever he growled, smacked him across the mouth, which was his old way of keeping him quiet. He licked Grandfather's hands and only sprang away when a leopard in the next cage snarled at him. Grandfather shooed the leopard away, and the tiger returned to lick his hands. But every now and then the leopard would rush at the bars and the tiger would slink back to his corner. A number of people had gathered to watch the reunion when a keeper pushed his way through the crowd and asked Grandfather what he was doing. "I'm talking to Timothy," said Grandfather. "Weren't you here when I gave him to the zoo 6 months ago?" "I haven't been here very long," said the surprised keeper. "Please continue your conversation." "But I have never been able to touch him myself. He is always very bad-tempered." "Why don't you put him somewhere else?" suggested Grandfather. "That leopard keeps frightening him. I'll go and see the superintendent about it." Grandfather went in search of the superintendent of the zoo, but found that he had gone home early, and so, after wandering about the zoo for a little while, he returned to Timothy's cage to say goodbye. It was beginning to get dark. He had been stroking and slapping Timothy for about 5 minutes when he found another keeper observing him with some alarm. Grandfather recognized him as the keeper who had been there when Timothy had first come to the zoo. "You remember me," said Grandfather. "Now why don't you transfer Timothy to another cage away from this stupid leopard?" "But, sir," stammered the keeper, "it is not your tiger." I know," said Grandfather testily. "I realize he is no longer mine, but you might at least take a suggestion or two from me." "I remember your tiger very well," said the keeper. "He died 2 months ago." "Died?" exclaimed Grandfather. "Yes, sir, of pneumonia. This tiger was trapped in the hills only last month, and he is very dangerous." Grandfather could think of nothing to say. The tiger was still licking his arm with increasing relish. Grandfather took what seemed to him an age to withdraw his hand from the cage. With his face near the tiger's, he mumbled, "Good night, Timothy," and giving the keeper a scornful look, walked briskly out of the zoo. Was that a nice story? Ruskin Bond is an Indian author of British descent. His stories are simple and easy to understand. They are captivating and enjoyable too. I hope you discovered that about this particular story. And if you enjoyed this one, do read some other books written by Ruskin Bond. The more you read, the faster your English will improve. You could read Rusty, The Hidden Pool, or The Room on the Roof. And until we meet again, take care and have a lovely weekend. I'll see you soon.